So this is probably what I've run into the most with new client consultations that I've been giving, and what the mindset and perspective is that they have at what results they want and how to achieve that. And the biggest thing that I've run into lately, and it always changes. If you see the videos that I do, there's always a change in what it is. Right now, the theme is that you need to do more to get more. I'm going to tell you this is the most self-defeating and misguided principle and perspective, not just in fitness, in the world. If you live by quality over quantity, you're going to see much more progress. Then the more, the better. In a lot of things, the more, not the better. Again, you want to talk about life? Okay. When we talk about money, more is not better, because you can make more money but be spending more, right? So it's how much money are you actually putting in your pocket that matters. Okay. When you talk about, you know, the gym, right? If the goal was to train as many times as possible and as long as possible, why wouldn't you think that the top bodybuilders in the world were training 7 days a week, 40 hours, 4 hours a day, right? Even 40 hours a week. It's just not happening. So that mindset of more is better, it's self-defeating, and actually digs you into a hole, because what it shows is you don't actually understand the process and what is the point of your weight training. So let's dive into exactly what is the point of weight training. It is to create a signal that forces the body to adapt. What does that mean? Okay, you put the body under stress. In this sense, it's a physical stress. You're putting the body under a load, under weights, right? Giving maximal effort to where it really has to force itself to be able to complete it. That creates a signal that says, hey, body, you better get bigger and stronger. You're going to get beat up next time this happens. And the body says, I don't want to do that, right? It's like anything. The body's not going to change unless you make it adapt. Now, the balance here is, you can create that signal and then overdo it, right? Once the signal has been created, there's no more signal that you really get out of it. Once you reach the point of stimulus, it's called, or that signal that tells the body that it needs to grow or get bigger, you can pretty much leave and get out of there. The problem is that people think, A, it takes so much to create that signal when it really doesn't. They're doing too much, right? Second, they're doing it too often. They're trying to reach that stimulus too often when the body's not recovering to be able to maximally hit it. So when we're now training too often, right, not only are we not recovering from the last session, right, to put ourselves in a position to improve from the last session, but now you're trying to create another stimulus when the body's not prepared for one, and that, again, requires stress. And now you're adding and amplifying the fatigue and the stress in that. So one of the biggest things I see is people who are either the beginning to intermediate range, even some of the experts, that they're training too much, right? They're training 6, 7, even sometimes 5 times a day could be too much, right? And it's not even just the amount of days, it's the amount of sets that they're doing, okay? And it's how much garbage they're doing. There isn't a black and white answer that I can give, right? But ultimately, at the end of the day, I can separate between beginner, intermediate, and expert. A beginner can gain muscle training 1, 2, 3 times a week, okay? The reason being is it's a new, fresh stimulus, right? And it doesn't require many sets. Someone who's never touched a weight before can do 1 set per muscle group per week and put on muscle. The reason why I say that is, if you're just starting out, this signal, this stimulus is so new to you that what's the point of going to training 5, 6 days a week for 2 hours a day? Where do you go from there, right? You always want to start with the minimum effective volume, right? So what is the minimum that you could do to get the maximum results? If you're just starting out, doing 1 set per muscle group per week versus doing 10 sets per muscle group for a week, you're not growing 10 times as fast. You're growing the same amount. In fact, you might even be growing less, because now you're hampering your body's ability to recover, because that's a lot. So again, bringing it back to the original question, do you need to train more to get more results? Absolutely not. You need to train effectively, and more importantly, you need to recover. Think about it this way. Your job in the gym is to simply create that signal. Okay, and there's not this thing that goes off in your head, oh, I created the signal, right? I could talk about a couple different ways of how you know that signal is being met, but before I do that, once that signal is created, you need to get out. You need to rest, you need to recover, you need to reduce fatigue, you need to eat, you need to sleep, because that's where the growth is happening. You're only breaking your body down. So what are you doing? Think about it this way. You scrape your arm, right? That's the stimulus. You scrape your arm, simpler, right? You training in the gym to a point where a stimulus is created or a signal is created is the same as you falling and scraping your arm, okay? The same thing happens when you're rebuilding yourself, right? And building that muscle, is that scab is forming over. What's happening is you're training too long, so you're creating too deep of a scab, so it takes even longer to heal from, and guess what? You're training too often, so it doesn't even fully heal, and then you scrape it again. Now again, I'm not saying muscle damage happens from training, but I'm giving you an example of how the frequency and the amount that you're training is causing problems. So how do you ultimately know that you've done enough? I'll give you some general guidelines, okay? Again, I would say between hitting muscle groups 1 to 3 times a week, I would say 2 is the sweet spot. But somebody training in the beginning, a beginner should train maybe one muscle group a week, maybe 2. They could train it twice. Okay, it's the amount of volume though. So I would say anywhere from 1 to 4 sets per muscle group per week is great for a beginner. Then moving from 4 to 8 for an intermediate, and then 8 to 12. And I'm talking about bigger muscle groups. Okay. Again, for the beginner, you could train the biceps, the triceps, the chest, and the back all the same, right? As you get to an intermediate, that 4 to 8, right? And this is working sets per week. So let's say you do chest 4 sets and 4 sets, right? You can maybe go a little bit more than that, but I wouldn't really need to, right? And then as an expert, you're talking about 8 to 12. That's 12 sets a week is a lot. You could do 6 sets of chest on one, 6 on another. That is quite a bit of chest work, okay? So quite a bit of quad work if you're really training optimally. Again, you could do less sets and keep the intensity high. Keep your workout time shorter, right? Create just the amount of stimulus, right? And then you have less to recover from. Again, it's all that balance. I talk about this trinity of factors between intensity, frequency, and volume. They each pull from each other. So depending on which direction you go, the other two need to follow. At the end of the day, again, I will always come back to the beginning question. Do you need to train more to gain more? No, you absolutely do not. Remember, once the signal or stimulus is created, you can't do any more. Anything more that you're doing is just causing more damage. So what it becomes is a mental issue, is that you cannot separate the idea of not going to the gym and making gains. And that's where ultimately you start to, when you confuse the gym with something therapeutic for your mental health or stress relieving, you take away from the purpose of training for gains, for muscle gain, for strength gains, right? So if you confuse the two, of course, you're going to self-identify with, hey, I don't want to be in the gym less because it is my outlet. Okay, well then sacrifice some of the progress you're making. You can't have it both ways. You can't have the progress, optimal progress that you want, but then also work out all the time, every single day. Not even every single day, too much, more than you really need. So once you realize that you could separate the two, that there's a difference between working out and training, right? Probably gonna do another video on this. You can start to maximize your gains because now you're focused on the goal of training for the purpose of building muscle and getting stronger. If you like this video and want more information just like this, subscribe to my channel. If you want to know what it takes to work with me one-on-one, please fill the application in my bio and I'll reach